Nigeria records 22 more COVID-19 cases. Total tally inches up to 276. Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria says fire at Accountant General's office suspicious. On the international scene, Italian Prime Minister warns the European Union could fall over COVID-19 pandemic. And in sport, Super Eagles coach W.H.O says he will sign new contract.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The numbers that climbed in number. COVID-19 pandemic cases have ticked up in number on Wednesday. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control, NCDC, has confirmed 22 new cases that have pushed up the national total to 276. The center says 44 patients have been discharged, and Lagos State has continued to harbor most of the cases, with 15 of the new cases reported in the state. Commissioner for Health, Professor Akin Abayomi, says the new cases brings the total number of confirmed cases in the state to 145. The commissioner also reported the death of a COVID-19 patient in the state, a 66-year-old who had recently returned from India. The Federal Capital Territory records 4 cases, 2 in Bauchi and 1 in Edo State. Many conspiracy theories have been tabled on social media recently, tying 5G technology to coronavirus. Some even went as far as presenting what had been described as doctored videos of the devastating radiation power of 5G. They say it kills everything in sight. Even a powerful mega church pastor has subscribed to the theories, as it claims the government's shutdown of churches in Lagos was to install the 5G network. Popular mega pastor Chris Oyakilome even released a viral video in which he linked the 5G network and the coronavirus to the Antichrist. While a voice of reason has sounded among the mighty Christian mega preachers, Daystar Christian Center senior pastor Sam Adeyemi has made a call to rein in those among them that peddle these theories. Adeyemi warns leaders to stop giving extreme interpretations to the coronavirus pandemic. The mega pastor went as far as felling Oyakilome's conspiracy theories, saying churches, mosques, schools and markets were shut down as well during the 1918 influenza. He said that incident was not blamed on the Antichrist. He said he gained the right perspective by studying the last global pandemic of 1918 before this new coronavirus. He called on religious leaders to use the opportunities in every crisis and not to project extreme interpretations that could cause fear to their followers. The 1918 pandemic was the Spanish flu crisis from January 1918 to December 1920. 500 million persons were infected and 50 million died. Many have reason to challenge Wednesday's inferno that engulfed the office complex of the Accountant General of the Federation. The Human Rights Writers Association of Nigeria, HURIWA, has described the fire as suspicious and scary. The association said in a statement the fire may not be unconnected to accusations of financial irregularities that have been raised by the National Assembly, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and a cross-section of Nigerians against the office. HURIWA recommends a demand for forensic investigations by independent criminal forensic scientists to ascertain the real motives or otherwise behind the sudden fire incident. The group said Nigerians should ask the government to come clean on how it has been unable to transparently render accounts of revenues generated from internal and external sources. HURIWA concluded that, quote, something is not adding up, end quote. It says the fire incident was too coincidental to be dismissed as just happenstance. It says this is a usual ploy of public officials who always set their offices ablaze in a bid to cover up their tracks. There were conjectures that arsonists could have set the fire that inflicted heavy damage to the office of the Accountant General of the Federation in Abuja on Wednesday. Vital equipment, documents, and even computer hard drives are said to have been destroyed. A team of investigators said in a preliminary post-fire report that the incident was sabotage. One overwhelmed fire officer was quoted as saying there were very significant damages to vital departments, Federation Accounts Expenditure Capital, and to administration maintenance, human resources, insurance, and ICT. The same officer is quoted as saying all backup records are gone. He said hard drives are burnt and every record is gone. Nigeria has experienced this type of mysterious fires in financial records area of public buildings for decades. The most memorable was the 1983 Nicom House fire in Marina, Lagos. It was the tallest building in Nigeria at the time, owned by the defunct Nigeria Eastern Telecommunications NET, which later became NITEL. As fire officials gave an assessment of sabotage and significant loss of every document, computer disk and financial records of the federal government, Minister for Budget and Planning Clement Agba is saying no official records were destroyed in the fire. Another ministry official said, quote, the fire did not affect our data center, which is fully backed up, end quote. This is an opposite report to what fire service investigators have said, and their verdict that the fire was an act of sabotage. While the billions of naira in donations from private businesses and citizens to the coronavirus efforts are part of the questions being raised by the public, popular music star W.H.O, whose father donated to the coronavirus relief fund, had gone on Twitter to demand that the government accounts for each kobo spent. He posted a message on his Twitter account in Pidgin, quote, make them return our money, which one be say office don't burn. They must account for each kobo, end quote. There are insinuations of a cover-up, especially now that huge financial contributions were made to the government by wealthy Nigerians and the private sector toward efforts to fight Covid-19 pandemic. The government has said the monies were placed in a private bank account set up as private sector coalition against Covid-19.
Coming up, African stories. AU reports African economies would be battered by Covid-19 outbreak. And later, international news. European Union warned it could fall over Covid-19 pandemic.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News and African Stories. The African Union, AU, says in a report, COVID-19 pandemic will take a heavy toll on African economies. Some economists have said Africa could see up to an 8% dip in its GDP growth rate. Because of the coronavirus pandemic, African countries are being advised to collaborate to help mitigate economic impacts of the pandemic. Koleta Wanjohi reports.
This EcoBank office in Addis Ababa is normally teeming with activity. Now it sits mostly empty during this COVID-19 period. The bank's country representative, James Kanagwa, says employees are now working from home and that their pay will not get cut. But a new report from the African Union shows that not all employees around the continent will be so lucky.
We've seen companies shutting down. When that happens, jobs are lost. When jobs are lost, it's chaos. We are seeing countries also locking down. And most of the developing world, a big chunk of the population is in the informal sector. These live by the day. You find a taxi driver, he's earning as he's working. The taxi driver, he has to pay some fees at each bus stop. Then in the markets, those food vendors and what. So once people are told lockdown and try to sort the problem, then you now have another problem of hunger.
The report says Africa will see less revenue from tourism and travel, which may lose at least $50 billion. And remittance from abroad will reduce too. The African Union also points out that oil producers in Africa may lose over $100 billion because of the drastic drop in oil prices globally. Big producers like Angola and Nigeria will reportedly lose at least $65 billion in income.
The price at which Nigeria had done its budget, which was it 57? they had done their budget at $57 dollars per barrel, and now they are fishing about $30 per barrel. You can see the significance of the budget hole that is going to emanate from this. And this is, of course, as you would imagine, is actually going to put pressure on the Naira, and with that, a lot of the other macroeconomic issues are going to be impacted.
Experts say COVID-19 requires individuals to change their spending habits.
For instance, if you're building a house, it's not yet complete. I think you need to put that on hold for now until the situation improves as you're saving. It's also going to be a challenge. Also, you don't have to, even the consumerism which had taken effect, people borrowing money to go and have weddings and what, all that will change. Because if you are doing a scientific wedding of having 20 people attending, meaning we are going to be more realistic to our situations, and also change some of our cultures, which have been propelling this lavishness.
The African Union is hoping the African Continental Free Trade Area can promote more trade within the continent and cushion the fallout from external shocks like coronavirus. But COVID-19 is threatening that as well, with some fearing the disease will derail the project's implementation on July 1st.
Seychelles has begun a nationwide lockdown on Wednesday. This will shut down non-essential services and restricts movement of persons for 21 days to prevent the spread of coronavirus in the country. The country recorded a positive COVID-19 case on Monday, bringing the total to 11. Authorities say airports will remain closed until the end of April. Meanwhile, Liberia's President George Weah has declared a state of emergency beginning on Friday morning because of the coronavirus pandemic. Weah has called for an emergency session of Parliament so that MPs can endorse the order that will impose restrictions on movement across the country. Authorities say the emergency law will last for 3 weeks and could be renewed until the COVID-19 threat to Liberia no longer exists. Weah said he was taking the measure because COVID-19 had entered a new phase and needed to be contained. Liberia has recorded 14 confirmed cases of COVID-19. 4 persons have died of the disease. No African country is used to a lifestyle of social separation and lockdowns. It's a continent of close relationships of touch and feel. As the South African lockdown continues, some sectors of the society have begun expressing frustration on the inconvenience and costs to them and their families. Elisa Injamele has the story.
South African roads are largely empty. Many are heeding the call by the president to stay at home. Only essential movement is permitted. Security personnel are up and about, ensuring that the rules are strictly adhered to, and they don't hesitate to arrest those who defy the lockdown guidelines. In some areas, though, residents have expressed exasperation as they say the lockdown is simply impractical for them. It's an absolutely frustrating time for township dwellers here, especially those who live in shacks. They say they want to fully observe the lockdown rules, but sometimes it's downright painful to stay inside.
Corona is affecting us. So we are no longer going to work. Kind of problems we're having. We no longer seeing our friends. We're always in the houses.
It's difficult for me because I'm staying in a shack with my family, my kids and my wife. It becomes very, very difficult because we have to bath. All of us in that small room. We have to cook in that small room. It becomes very, very difficult.
Government continues to encourage the South African citizens to adhere by the rules.
Acceding to the call by the president when he said, we need to join hands, we need to collaborate, we need to work together to combat the spread of COVID-19. Let's avoid spreading fake news through our mobile phones because we keep on spreading scary information that we don't have information about.
The lockdown period has also had some positive effects in many communities here in South Africa. One of the major ones is the decrease in crime. The Ministry of Police has issued a statement announcing a decrease in serious and violent crimes since the start of the coronavirus lockdown. The ministry also says there's been a drop in murder and rape cases.
When we return, international news. European Union warned it could fall over the COVID-19 pandemic. And later, sports. Super Eagles coach W.H.O says we'll sign new contract.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the international scene, global COVID-19 cases are now at 1.5 million, as both the US and the UK recorded their deadliest day. As American death toll rose to more than 1,800 on Tuesday, White House task force officials say there are signs isolation measures were working. Revised coronavirus model predicts fewer deaths, but tens of thousands in the US still expected to die by August. Meanwhile, the number of coronavirus deaths in Spain has risen to 15,238, but the rate of new infections appears to be slowing. The figure represents a return to a daily decrease in new cases. New infections had been declining for 4 consecutive days until the numbers rose again on Tuesday and Wednesday. Parliament is debating an extension to Spain's lockdown, but the Prime Minister has suggested the situation is beginning to get under control. And official UK figures showed 938 more persons had died in hospitals, bringing the total to 7,000. The Scottish government says 81 more persons have died of coronavirus. The latest daily death toll takes the total fatalities in the country to 447. Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte says the European Union might collapse as a project unless all leaders decisively come together to help worst-hit countries fight this pandemic. EU finance ministers failed on Wednesday to agree on a bailout plan for hard-hit member states. Despite all efforts, EU leaders were unable to bridge differences on how to rebuild their economies after the coronavirus, with a North versus South split and burden sharing for the worst affected countries, especially Italy and Spain. The two countries are insisting on a solidarity fund for which the European partners would pay by gently borrowing on the financial markets. Italy has been pushing for a coordinated economic response from the EU by allowing debt sharing, but the proposal is opposed by Germany and the Netherlands. Head of the World Health Organization has warned world leaders against politicizing the rapid spread of coronavirus. Tedros Ghebreyesus says politicization could lead to more deaths. He said this a day after President Trump threatened to cut off U.S. funding to the United Nations agency.
On Tuesday, U.S. President Trump used his daily briefing to threaten to cut off U.S. funding for the World Health Organization.
We spend $450 billion, $452 billion, almost $500 billion last year, hundreds of billions in previous years, and they got to do better than that.
After praising the global body for months, he now says it was wrong and too China-centric. Well, on Wednesday, the Director General of the WHO hit back, saying politicizing COVID-19 will only lead to more deaths.
The focus of all political parties should be to save their people. Please don't politicize this virus. It exploits the differences you have at the national level. If you want to be exploited, and if you want to have many more body bags, then you do it. If you don't want many more body bags, then you refrain from politicizing it.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is said to be responding to treatment for coronavirus as he spends the 4th night in hospital. Official Downing Street spokesman says Johnson is being kept in the hospital for close monitoring, but he is in a stable condition. COVID-19 death toll in the UK is now more than 7,000. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's office has announced there will be a relaxation of lockdown rules next week, but the public must adhere to all measures put in place. Ban on public gatherings of 2 persons and the closure of shops selling non-essential goods were among the series of restrictions announced by Johnson in mid-March. COVID-19 is not only a global public health emergency, but also a source of significant regional and increasingly global economic disruption. This pandemic impacts the energy and climate world in many ways. World economic downturn has put pressure on global oil prices, leading the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries to consider further cuts to production.
Some consulting firms are predicting that global oil demand will drop by another 23 million barrels a day this month, as measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19 continue to slash demand for jet fuel, gasoline, and diesel. The failure of OPEC and producers led by Russia to extend a deal on output curbs has made the situation even more chaotic. The Brent crude price has been falling since February, and the market prices have now fallen from a high of $65 a barrel to only $25 in the end of March.
The major reasons too because of the coronavirus spreading and causing lots of major factories in the major economies shut down. So we see the industrial demand actually substantially drops. You can also see that in the PMI figures. So I think that's the crucial reason for the demand side. But for the supply side, I think it's not very clear a major reason for the oil long trends. We see the OPEC Plus probably will reach a deal, but I still see that the key thing to drive the oil prices will be still whether this pandemic is going to ease in the near future.
OPEC Plus is working on a deal to cut petroleum production by about 10% of world supply, or 10 million barrels per day. But even if it can reach a final deal, analysts are saying that crude prices are not likely to return to their previous highs.
The rebound point for low-level crude oil prices has already been reached. The overall trend is now positive as the countries are trying to reach a deal, though there may still be fluctuations during the whole process. Still, recession in the global economy will reduce demand for crude oil. So while crude oil prices are recovering, they won't return to their previous level.
For the China market itself, falling crude oil prices are good news because the country is a large petroleum importer. But crude oil is an important part of global production chains, and stable crude prices are needed for a healthy global economy.
Up next, sports. Super Eagles coach W.H.O says they will sign new contracts. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sport. Super Eagles coach W.H.O says is ready to meet all the conditions set by the Nigeria Football Federation in order to continue as the head coach of the senior national team. Part of the conditions in the new contract is for the coach to be paid in Naira currency and be domiciled in the country. He would also monitor games of the Nigeria Professional Football League. Brazil football legend Ronaldo smiled and hugged his loved ones as he was pictured outside prison for the first time in more than a month. A 40-year-old has been released from jail and placed under house arrest. Ronaldo and his brother were arrested in March with fake passports. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.